Captain Sarah Mitchell stepped out of the black SUV onto the hot asphalt of Naval Base Coronado. The California sun beat down mercilessly as she adjusted her crisp uniform and grabbed her duffel bag from the trunk. After 15 years of distinguished service, including 3 combat deployments and countless classified operations, she had finally received her dream assignment as the new base operations commander. The base bustled with activity as Marines, sailors, and SEALs moved between buildings with purpose. Sarah had heard stories about Coronado's reputation as one of the most elite military installations in the world. This was where the Navy's most legendary warriors trained, where boys became men and men became legends. As she walked toward the administration building, Sarah noticed the curious glances from personnel around the base. Some nodded respectfully when they spotted her captain's bars, while others seemed surprised to see a woman in such a senior position at this traditionally male-dominated facility. Sarah was no stranger to being underestimated. Throughout her military career, she had consistently proven herself in environments where women were rarely seen. She had earned her rank through exceptional performance in logistics, strategic planning, and crisis management. Her record spoke for itself, but she knew that respect had to be earned fresh at every new assignment. The morning briefing was scheduled for over 800 hours in the main conference room. Sarah spent her first hour reviewing personnel files and operational reports, familiarizing herself with the base's current status and upcoming training exercises. The facility housed approximately 3,000 military personnel, including some of the most elite special operations forces in the world. As she made her way to the briefing room, Sarah passed through the central courtyard where several groups of SEALs were conducting physical training. Their instructor's voice echoed across the space as he barked orders about proper form and endurance standards. The sight of these warriors pushing themselves to their physical limits reminded Sarah why she had worked so hard to earn this position. The briefing room was already half full when Sarah arrived. Officers from various departments sat around the large oval table, reviewing their notes and discussing ongoing operations in hushed tones. Sarah took her designated seat at the head of the table and began organizing her materials. Commander Jake Reynolds, the base's executive officer, called the meeting to order promptly at 0800. He was a seasoned veteran with 22 years of service and a reputation for running tight operations. Sarah had read his file and was impressed by his extensive combat experience and leadership record. "Good morning, everyone," Commander Reynolds began. "Before we start with our regular briefings, I want to introduce our new base operations commander, Captain Sarah Mitchell. She comes to us with an outstanding record of service and will be overseeing all training coordination and resource allocation." Sarah stood and nodded to the assembled officers. "Thank you, Commander Reynolds. I'm honored to be here and look forward to working with all of you to maintain Coronado's reputation for excellence." The briefing proceeded smoothly through various departmental reports. The medical officer discussed recent training injuries and recovery protocols. The logistics chief outlined supply chain challenges and upcoming equipment deliveries. The intelligence officer provided updates on current threat assessments and security measures. After the formal meeting concluded, several officers approached Sarah to introduce themselves and offer assistance with her transition. The base chaplain mentioned upcoming morale events. The communications officer discussed protocol for classified briefings. Each interaction reinforced Sarah's impression that this was a professional, well-run operation. As the conference room emptied, Sarah decided to take a walking tour of the facilities to better understand the base layout and observe daily operations firsthand. She wanted to be visible to the troops and available for questions or concerns. Her first stop was the medical facility, where she met with the chief medical officer to discuss health and safety protocols for the intensive training programs. The doctor explained how they had reduced training injuries by 30% over the past year through improved screening and conditioning programs. Next, Sarah visited the armory and equipment storage areas. The quartermaster gave her a detailed overview of inventory management and maintenance procedures for the sophisticated gear used by special operations teams. Every piece of equipment was meticulously cataloged and maintained to ensure peak performance when lives depended on it. The communications center was her third stop, where technicians monitored radio traffic and maintained secure connections with command headquarters and deployed units worldwide. The complexity of coordinating multiple simultaneous operations while maintaining operational security was impressive to witness. As Sarah continued her tour, she noticed that word of her presence had spread throughout the base. Personnel she passed offered respectful greetings, and she could sense the curiosity about how she would approach her new leadership role. The physical training areas were particularly impressive. Multiple obstacle courses of varying difficulty levels stretched across several acres, designed to push human endurance and problem-solving abilities to their limits. Sarah watched as teams of trainees struggled through rope climbs, wall traversals, and mud crawls under the watchful eyes of their instructors. The swimming facilities were equally impressive, featuring multiple pools designed for different aspects of aquatic training. Some pools simulated ocean conditions with artificial waves and currents, while others were configured for underwater navigation and combat swimming techniques. Sarah's tour concluded at the shooting ranges, where the distinctive sound of precision marksmanship training filled the air. Multiple firing lines accommodated different weapon systems and training scenarios, from basic marksmanship to advanced tactical situations. As she walked back toward the administrative area, Sarah felt confident about her new assignment. The base was clearly operating at a high level of efficiency and professionalism. Her role would be to maintain these standards while looking for opportunities to enhance training effectiveness and resource utilization. The afternoon brought her first real test as base operations commander. A training accident during a high-altitude parachute exercise had resulted in a minor injury, requiring immediate coordination between medical, safety, and training personnel. Sarah's quick response and clear communication helped resolve the situation efficiently while ensuring proper documentation and safety protocol compliance. By evening, Sarah had settled into her new office and begun reviewing the next week's training schedule. The complexity of coordinating multiple simultaneous exercises involving different units and equipment requirements would challenge her organizational skills. But this was exactly the type of responsibility she had worked years to achieve. 3 weeks into her assignment at Coronado, Captain Sarah Mitchell had established herself as a competent and fair leader. Her morning routine included a 5 a.m. run around the base perimeter, followed by a review of overnight reports and preparation for the day's challenges. On this particular Tuesday morning, Sarah was conducting an inspection of the equipment storage facilities when she encountered her first real test of authority. The massive warehouse contained millions of dollars worth of specialized gear, from night vision systems to underwater breathing apparatus, all requiring precise inventory control and maintenance schedules. As she examined a shipment of newly arrived tactical equipment with the supply sergeant, Sarah heard voices approaching from the far end of the warehouse. A group of SEALs was retrieving gear for an upcoming training exercise, their conversation echoing off the metal walls. "I don't understand why they keep putting desk jockeys in charge of operational decisions," one voice said loudly. "Half these officers have never seen real combat." Sarah continued her inspection, choosing to focus on her duties rather than engage with what seemed like typical military grumbling. She had learned long ago that proving herself through actions was more effective than responding to every criticism. The group moved closer, and Sarah could now see 5 SEALs in training uniforms, led by a tall, muscular man with the bearing of a seasoned warrior. His uniform displayed the trident insignia that marked him as a qualified SEAL, and his confident demeanor suggested significant experience. "Look at this setup," the lead SEAL continued, gesturing toward the organized equipment rows. "Everything's arranged like some corporate office instead of a combat facility. Pretty soon they'll want us to file forms in triplicate before we can access our own gear." The supply sergeant shifted uncomfortably beside Sarah, clearly recognizing the potential for confrontation. Sarah had faced similar situations throughout her career and knew that how she handled this moment would set the tone for future interactions. The SEAL team leader finally noticed Sarah's presence and approached with a smirk. His name tape read Davidson, and his casual swagger suggested someone accustomed to getting his way through intimidation and reputation. "Well, well," Davidson said, looking Sarah up and down dismissively. "Another staff officer doing inspections. Let me guess, you're here to tell us how to organize our equipment more efficiently?" Sarah turned to face Davidson directly, maintaining professional composure despite the obvious disrespect in his tone. I'm conducting a routine inspection of inventory procedures, she replied evenly. Is there something specific you need assistance with? Davidson chuckled and glanced back at his team members, who were watching the exchange with interest. Assistance? From you? He pointed at Sarah's uniform. What's your rank there, Lieutenant? Maybe you should stick to filing paperwork and let the real warriors handle the combat gear. The supply sergeant stepped forward nervously. Sir, this is Captain Mitchell, our new base operations commander. Davidson's expression shifted slightly, but his arrogant demeanor remained unchanged. Captain, huh? That's interesting. Tell me, Captain, how many combat deployments have you completed? How many operations have you planned that actually involved shooting back? Sarah felt the familiar surge of frustration that came with these confrontations, but years of experience had taught her patience. I've completed 3 combat deployments and been involved in planning dozens of successful operations, she replied calmly. Planning, Davidson repeated with emphasis. So you're a planner. That's what I thought. You sit in air-conditioned offices pushing papers while real operators risk their lives executing your theoretical strategies. The other SEALs remained silent, some looking uncomfortable with their leader's aggressive approach. One younger team member seemed particularly bothered by the disrespectful display. I understand your concerns about operational effectiveness, Sarah said, maintaining her professional tone. If you have specific issues with current procedures, I'm always open to constructive feedback. Davidson laughed outright. Constructive feedback? Here's some feedback. Stop pretending that your administrative experience qualifies you to oversee special operations training. The men and women in this unit risk everything based on decisions made by people like you who've never been under real fire. Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but she refused to take the bait. I appreciate your dedication to your team's safety and effectiveness. That's exactly why proper coordination and resource management are essential. Resource management, Davidson scoffed. You sound like a business consultant, not a military officer. Do you even know how to field strip a weapon, Captain? Or is your expertise limited to spreadsheets and meeting schedules? The confrontation was attracting attention from other personnel in the warehouse. Several Marines and sailors had stopped their work to observe the exchange, sensing the tension between the SEAL and the base commander. Sarah realized that this moment would define her relationship with the elite units under her command. Davidson was testing her, probing for weakness or uncertainty. How she responded would determine whether she gained the respect of these warriors or became another administrative officer they could dismiss and ignore. Petty Officer Davidson, Sarah said, her voice taking on a firmer edge while remaining professional. I understand that trust must be earned, especially in an environment where lives depend on competent leadership. I respect your experience and your commitment to your team. Davidson's smirk widened. But, Sarah continued, disrespectful conduct toward superior officers undermines the discipline and professionalism that makes special operations effective. I'm willing to demonstrate my qualifications through performance, not argument. Demonstrate? Davidson laughed. What are you going to do? Show me your filing system. The tension in the warehouse was palpable. The supply sergeant looked ready to call for backup, while the other SEALs watched their leader with expressions ranging from admiration to concern. Sarah stepped closer to Davidson, her voice dropping to a level that only he could hear clearly. I'm going to do my job, Petty Officer. I'm going to ensure that you and every other operator on this base has the resources, support, and training opportunities needed to accomplish your mission safely and effectively. Davidson's expression hardened. Pretty words, Captain, but words don't stop bullets or compensate for poor planning. When one of my team members doesn't come home because of some desk jockey's mistake, your good intentions won't mean much. The comment hit deeper than Sarah let show. She had indeed lost people under her command during her deployments, and the weight of those decisions never left her. But she also knew that effective leadership required standing firm in the face of challenges to authority. You're right that lives are at stake, Sarah replied quietly. That's exactly why I take this responsibility seriously. I've buried friends too, Petty Officer. The difference is that I learned from those experiences instead of using them as excuses for insubordination. For the first time, Davidson's confident expression faltered slightly. He had expected either anger or retreat from the captain, not this calm acknowledgement of shared loss and responsibility. The warehouse had grown uncomfortably quiet as the confrontation between Captain Sarah Mitchell and Petty Officer Davidson reached its peak. Word had spread quickly through the facility, and a crowd had gathered at a respectful distance to witness what many saw as a defining moment for the new base commander. Commander Jake Reynolds appeared at the warehouse entrance, having been alerted to the situation by concerned personnel. His presence added another layer of tension to an already volatile confrontation. Behind him stood several other senior officers, their expressions grave as they assessed the scene. Davidson, emboldened by the audience, decided to escalate further. "You know what, Captain? Since you're so confident in your qualifications, maybe you'd like to prove them. We have a training exercise scheduled for this afternoon. Why don't you join us and show everyone how a real leader operates?" The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Sarah recognized the trap immediately. If she declined, Davidson would use it as proof that she was just another administrative officer, afraid of real military work. If she accepted, he likely had something planned that would embarrass her in front of the entire base. "What type of exercise?" Sarah asked calmly. "Combat marksmanship and tactical response," Davidson replied with a wolfish grin. "The kind of skills that actually matter when bullets start flying, unless you think that's outside your area of expertise." The crowd murmured with interest. Combat marksmanship was Davidson's specialty, and he held several base records for accuracy and speed. It seemed like professional suicide for Sarah to accept such a challenge. Commander Reynolds stepped forward, clearly intending to defuse the situation. "Petty Officer Davidson, this is neither the time nor the place for—" "It's all right, Commander," Sarah interrupted, her voice cutting through the tension. "I accept the challenge." The warehouse erupted in surprised whispers. Davidson's grin widened, while several of the watching officers looked concerned about where this confrontation was heading. "Excellent," Davidson said. "Range 7, 1400 hours. We'll see what kind of warrior you really are, Captain." Sarah nodded once and turned to leave, followed by Commander Reynolds and the other senior officers. The crowd slowly dispersed, buzzing with anticipation about the upcoming showdown. In her office, Sarah sat quietly reviewing Davidson's personnel file. Marcus Davidson, age 32, 12 years of service, 2 Bronze Stars, 1 Silver Star, expert marksman rating, multiple combat deployments. He was exactly the type of elite warrior that Coronado was known for producing. Commander Reynolds knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "Sarah, what the hell are you thinking? Davidson is one of our best shooters. This isn't going to end well." "Maybe not," Sarah replied, closing the file. "But backing down would have ended worse. I need the respect of these men to do my job effectively. There are other ways to earn respect that don't involve public humiliation." Sarah looked up at her executive officer. "Jake, I know what I'm doing. Trust me." At 1400 hours, Range 7 was packed with spectators. Word had spread throughout the base about the challenge match between the new captain and the legendary SEAL marksman. Marines, sailors, and SEALs lined the viewing area, while senior officers watched from the elevated observation deck. Davidson arrived in full tactical gear, his rifle case slung over his shoulder with casual confidence. He worked the crowd like a prize fighter before a championship bout, accepting backslaps and encouragement from his supporters. Sarah approached the firing line wearing standard combat utilities and carrying a simple rifle case. Her demeanor was calm and focused, showing none of the bravado that Davidson displayed. The contrast between their preparations was stark and noticeable. The range safety officer explained the challenge parameters. 3 shooting positions at varying distances, 100, 300, and 500 meters. 5 rounds each position. Best combined score wins. Standard military targets with scoring rings clearly marked. Davidson would shoot first, a decision that Sarah had agreed to readily. She wanted to see exactly what she was up against before making her own attempt. The SEAL took his position with practiced ease, his movements smooth and confident. The crowd fell silent as he settled into his shooting stance. The first 5 rounds at 100 meters were fired in rapid succession, each shot perfectly placed in the center ring. The spotters called out perfect scores as Davidson smoothly transitioned to the 300-meter line. His performance at 300 meters was equally impressive. 5 more perfect shots. each one finding the bullseye with mechanical precision. The crowd murmured appreciatively as Davidson moved to the final position. The 500-meter shots required more time and calculation. Wind conditions, bullet drop, and target acquisition all became factors at this distance. Davidson took his time with each shot, his breathing controlled and steady. When the smoke cleared, 4 perfect shots and 1 very close miss gave him a near-perfect score. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Davidson stood and acknowledged their appreciation with a modest wave, but his eyes were fixed on Sarah with unmistakable triumph. "Your turn, Captain," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Let's see what they taught you in staff school." Sarah stepped to the firing line and opened her rifle case. The weapon she withdrew caused an immediate stir among the watching SEALs. It was not a standard military rifle, but a custom-built precision instrument with specialized optics and modifications. Commander Reynolds leaned forward on the observation deck. He recognized the rifle configuration from Sarah's personnel file, but he had never mentioned it to anyone. Sarah's marksmanship credentials were listed in her official record, but they were buried among other qualifications and easily overlooked. Sarah's movements were methodical and precise as she prepared her weapon. Unlike Davidson's crowd-pleasing confidence, her preparation was businesslike and focused. She checked wind conditions, adjusted her scope, and settled into a shooting position that demonstrated years of training and practice. The first shot at 100 meters was fired after careful aim. Perfect center. The second shot followed immediately. Another perfect hit. Sarah's rhythm was different from Davidson's, more deliberate but equally effective. 5 perfect shots at 100 meters. The crowd's energy shifted as Sarah moved to the 300-meter line. This was no longer a certain victory for their champion. Sarah's shooting stance and weapon handling showed expertise that few had expected from a base operations commander. 5 more perfect shots at 300 meters. The crowd had grown quiet, realizing they were witnessing something special. Davidson's confident expression had been replaced by focused attention as he watched Sarah's technique. The 500-meter position would determine the winner. Sarah took extra time with her preparation, calculating wind drift and adjusting her scope for the increased distance. The first shot rang out across the range, perfect center. The second shot followed the same precise routine, perfect center. By the fourth shot, the crowd was completely silent. Even Davidson was leaning forward, watching intently as Sarah prepared for her final shot. The pressure was immense, with hundreds of people watching and her credibility on the line. Sarah's breathing slowed to an almost meditative rhythm. She acquired the target through her scope, made final adjustments for wind and distance, and squeezed the trigger with the smooth control that comes from thousands of hours of practice. The shot echoed across the range, followed by an eternity of silence as the spotter checked the target through high-powered binoculars. "Perfect center," the spotter called out. The range exploded in cheers and applause that dwarfed the response to Davidson's performance. Sarah had not just matched the SEAL's score, she had achieved a perfect score under intense pressure while being underestimated by everyone present. Davidson stared at the target display in disbelief before slowly walking over to Sarah. The crowd quieted as everyone waited to see how the defeated challenger would respond to his unexpected loss. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Davidson asked, his voice subdued but genuinely curious. Sarah secured her weapon and turned to face him. "Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, followed by advanced marksmanship training with Delta Force instructors. I spent 2 years as a designated marksman before transitioning to staff positions." Davidson's face went pale as the implications sank in. Scout Sniper School was one of the most elite training programs in the military, with a failure rate exceeding 70%. Advanced training with Delta Force was reserved for only the most exceptional marksmen in the armed forces. "I had no idea," Davidson said quietly. "You never asked," Sarah replied simply. Commander Reynolds approached from the observation deck, followed by several other senior officers and a crowd of impressed personnel. The mood had shifted completely from anticipation of Sarah's embarrassment to awe at her unexpected demonstration of elite skills. "Outstanding shooting, Captain," Reynolds said formally, but his eyes showed genuine admiration. Sarah nodded acknowledgement to the crowd and began packing her equipment. The demonstration was over, but its impact would resonate throughout the base for months to come. Davidson remained at the firing line, staring at the perfect target score that had just redefined his understanding of his new commanding officer. Around him, SEALs and other special operations personnel discussed what they had just witnessed with the respect reserved for true warriors. The message was clear. Captain Sarah Mitchell had earned her position through merit, not politics or administrative shuffling. She possessed the combat skills and training to understand the challenges faced by the elite units under her command. As the crowd dispersed, word spread quickly throughout Naval Base Coronado that their new operations commander was not what anyone had expected. The woman who had been dismissed as just another desk officer had just demonstrated shooting skills that rivaled the best marksmen in the special operations community. For Sarah, the demonstration had served its purpose. Respect had been earned through performance, not argument or authority. From this point forward, when she made decisions affecting training and operations, the elite warriors under her command would know that those decisions came from someone who understood their world intimately.